Recorded Books presents an unabridged recording of The Loner, Rattlesnake Valley by J.A. Johnstone, narrated by Brian Hutchison and directed by Emily Asher.
Chapter 1. Kid Morgan reined his horse to a halt and looked at the bleached white skull on the ground in front of him. He rested his hands on the saddle horn and leaned forward to study not only the grotesquely grinning skull, but also the two long bones laid across each other that accompanied it. "Skull and crossbones," the kid muttered. "Pirates." More than a dozen years earlier, in what seemed like a previous half-forgotten lifetime ago, when he'd still been known as Conrad Browning, the kid had read a novel called Treasure Island. He knew about pirates and the symbol on the flags flown on their ships. The question was, what was that ominous symbol doing in the mostly arid landscape of West Texas, hundreds of miles from the sea? The kid lifted his head. Keen eyes gazed at his surroundings. A broad valley bordered by ranges of low, brush-covered hills fell away to his left and right, and stretched in front of him for at least 20 miles to the east before the hills closed in sharply and pinched it off, leaving only a narrow opening for the trail. Beyond the hills, what appeared to be an endless stretch of sandy wasteland was visible through the gap. Behind the kid was the pass through which he had just ridden, in the rugged gray mountains that closed off the western end of the valley. In stark contrast to the desert, the mountains, and the scrubby hills, the valley itself was an unexpected oasis of green. A line of trees marked the meandering course of a river that rose from springs in the mountains and flowed eastward, watering the rangeland on either side of it before the desert wasteland swallowed it whole at the far end of the valley. The grass that covered the range might not have been considered lush in some parts of the world, but in West Texas, it certainly was. Not surprisingly, the kid saw cattle grazing here and there. Hardy longhorns that not only survived but actually thrived on the graze they found. A man who'd been riding for days through sandy, rocky country that wasn't much good for anything, as the kid had, would find the sight of the valley mighty appealing. Except for the skull and crossed bones in the trail that looked for all the world like a warning to keep out. A tight smile pulled at the corners of Kid Morgan's mouth. Even before the events that had changed his life so dramatically, he'd never been the sort of hombre who took kindly to being told what to do. He lifted the reins and heeled the buckskin into motion again. As he did, movement stirred within the bleached skull, visible behind the empty eye sockets. A rattlesnake suddenly crawled out through one of those sockets and coiled on the ground. The vicious buzz of its rattles filled the air as it raised its head, ready to strike. Its forked tongue flickered in and out of its mouth. The kid's horse was used to gunfire and the smell of powder smoke, but the sound and scent of the snake spooked it. The buckskin tossed its head, shied away, and tried to rear up. The kid's strong left hand on the reins kept the horse under firm control. His right hand brushed his black coat aside and dipped to the Colt holstered on his hip. Steel whispered against leather as he drew the gun, then the hot, still air was shattered by the blast of a shot. It seemed that the kid hadn't even taken time to aim, but the snake's head exploded as the bullet found it. The thick body, with its diamond-shaped markings, uncoiled and writhed frenziedly as the knowledge of its death raced through its prehistoric nervous system. The kid's lips tightened in distaste as he watched the snake whip around and die. With his gun still in his hand, the kid dismounted. He stepped around the snake, which had a grisly red smear where its head used to be. A swift kick from the kid sent the skull bouncing into some brush. He reached down, picked up one of the long bones, and flung it off in a different direction. The other bone went sailing away with another flick of his wrist. "You shouldn't have done that," a voice seemed to say in the back of his head. Whoever those bones belonged to may have been innocent of any wrongdoing. The kid didn't know if the voice belonged to his own conscience, not that he would have admitted to having such a thing after all the men he'd killed, justifiably or not, or to his late wife. Either way, hearing voices was a sure sign that a person was going mad. The revulsion he'd felt toward the snake was the last straw. He'd already been a little angry about being warned to keep out of the valley, and he'd given in to his irritation. He usually tried to keep his emotions under control at all times. A man who wanted to live very long in that harsh land couldn't afford to let himself be distracted by hatred or
Sample complete. Ready to continue?